So then I moved on to the layer with the feminine. Embodying and shining my light with the feminine. Oh, goodness gracious. And I've held space for this too. And there have been layers of this too where I feel this block, you know? So I guess the first reflection of this is just that I've not had a connection really with the feminine. Not at a wide level. So I've always had one or two deep friendships with a woman. So I've always had one or two deep friendships with a woman, you know. I've always had one, you know, at least one best friend, you know. In middle school, I had one best friend who I've reconnected with. And in high school, well, okay, my gosh, I think it was elementary school actually, Sharon Odell, now Sharon Schreiber. And in high school, well, in middle school, Sharon was elementary to middle school. And then I switched middle schools and I met Nicole. And Nicole Crow. And, you know, I've had friendships with these women. You know, in high school, I had some friendships that were, you know, I had my little group of a couple of girls. Still have a connection with Sharon. And Nicole and I are not as close as we once were. We've gone in such different directions in our life, and we've grown and we've become such different women, but we're still there and we support each other and we love each other in our own very different values and ideologies. And, you know, we support each other. And my very, very best friend, Shannon, Larissa, who I have the deepest, most profound feminine friendship that I've ever had. And I've got Jade Bertod, who started out as a mentor, who I just love and adore. And she's, you know, Shannon lives in Austin. She doesn't even live close to me. And Jade lives in Bali, but we connect. We have voice clips and we send each other, you know, we hold space for our own layers that are coming up, and then we come together and we share. And sometimes there are so many layers and it goes so deep, and the sharing gets to be so much. There's so much to share, but we're there and we have this beautiful container. And I've explored recently with these women, with Shannon and with Jade, that there are these layers of intimacy with the feminine that we crave and we don't really know how to approach. And there are these ideas of, is that kind of gay? Like, you know, and it's not even like, oh, is that gay is a bad thing? It's just like, where is that boundary? You know, where is that boundary? You know, all of us have love for the LGBTQ community, and, you know, we have totally open, wide open hearts for all of that and no judgment, but we're exploring in ourselves this desire for a deeper connection with the feminine and just wondering, where are those boundaries? Like, you know, we're exploring those boundaries for ourselves and what feels good and what feels true to our core. And, you know, it's just so interesting that we all have this exploration and connection with the opposite sex and the same sex. And I've explored so much my connection with the opposite sex, and it feels very natural to do so. And what I've recognized recently is that exploring my connection with the feminine doesn't feel natural to me. It doesn't. You know, I've had these friendships that went to the depths in my soul that I have that I've ventured to that resonate to the levels that I'm resonating with my core truth. I've always had one or two friendships that did that. But on a larger level, I'm very closed off to the feminine. And so I've been exploring with that. And one of the most beautiful places that I've been exploring with that has been in my tribal yoga sessions. There's a beautiful woman, Tara, who holds such a gorgeous space full of just, oh, there's so much goddess energy, and it's so sensual, and it's so empowering, and it's so beautiful. And there are women of every shape, size, color, and age in this group, and it's just so magical. And yet, I have a hard time embracing my sexuality there. It's a very safe space. But as I started holding space for those layers and recognizing that, I recognized that it didn't feel safe to me because we have wounds of the feminine. There are wounds of the feminine. Between the feminine, just like there are wounds between the masculine. You know, it's so easy for us oftentimes to start addressing the wounds that exist between us. Sometimes we will gravitate toward one or the other. You know, maybe we'll start healing the wounds of women between women, or men will start healing the wounds between men, or we will start in relationship. We're going to start wherever we feel safest. In women, or men will start healing the wounds between men, or we will start in relationship. We're going to start wherever we feel safest, wherever it feels most natural for us to start that connection. For me, it's always been in relationship. As a Piscean, everything is about relationship for me. And so all of my healing, all of my growth, everything has always been, you know, masculine, feminine. But feminine. Oh, okay. Let's start exploring this, right? Oh, goodness. And so as I felt into, you know, I was out, we were having a birthday party. It was so beautiful. It was beautiful women. We were at the studio, and these women were we were all just dancing and moving, but it moved to a point where it was like, oh, and I felt it in the moment. And I was like, oh, what is this? Why am I freezing? And so I just sat with it and I kind of observed it, and I did my best not to judge. Because of course, I mean, you know, I've worked through so many layers of this before, you know, prior to this moment of judging myself. You have no breasts. You are not feminine. Look at how skinny and slim you are. You're not curvy. You think you have an ass? My goodness, look at that voluptuous woman over there. Oh, she's gorgeous. Look at that woman embracing her Shakti. She's so sexy. I don't feel that. Look at these women shining their light. Look at these women. Look at these women shining their light. Look at these women. Look at these women. I'm not that. I definitely have worked through those layers. Oh, I've worked through so many of those layers. And I still, you know, there's still some whisperings of some of those things, but I don't judge them anymore. I sit with them now. I've learned to sit with them and invite them in. And so I froze and I felt it. I said, okay, I'm going to create some space to hold space for this. And so over the next few days, you know, layers continue to arise, you know, clarity continued to come to me, and I had a difficult time holding space for this one, actually. It was something that I had one of my fellow coaches hold space for with me. And then I held some space on my own too. It's always, these things always just, it comes in layers. You peel one back and then you address something else that you think is separate, and then it peels back more of those other layers that were connected. It's just really, I mean, even these layers that I'm exploring today, there's some connection to what I explored just 2 weeks ago in my podcast. And then last weekend, there were more layers of it. I mean, it's so ongoing. It's so ongoing. And this is my goal as we explore into these layers. This is my goal, is to help people to have the empowerment to be able to do this on a regular basis the way that I do. I could never share with you all the layers that I'm working through all the time because, goodness, it's constant. It's constant. It doesn't end. We don't get to a point where this journey ends. We simply have the tools to be able to move through so that we can stay in flow and continue to move forward and continue to grow, continue to shine brighter. So as I held space for this layer, this frozen feeling, once again, there were a couple of layers that came up. One was that it's not safe to embrace my sexuality. I mean, this was the very first layer of it wasn't the first layer, but this was a while ago. This original, it's not original, but gosh, the experience that I'm talking about, which feels like a lifetime, but maybe 6 months ago. So this layer, it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe for me to embrace, it wasn't safe. And then I recognized that actually there was also this layer of, this judgment. There are these layers that we work through of dimming our light to not make other women feel uncomfortable or to be judged by them. And then there's these other layers of being triggered by other women's light being so bright. And I mean, gosh, there's been so many layers that have moved through where, I've come upon women who shone so fucking bright, and it was intimidating. But I took it, I recognized that was an opportunity, that was an initiation. Our light as the feminine is such an initiation for the other feminine when it can be embodied from the heart and expressed. Even when it's embodied in distorted ways, when we're triggered by that, it's an initiation. The feminine is the initiatrix. The feminine within all of us is the initiatrix. And so to allow ourselves as women to be initiated by the feminine outside of us, that's vulnerable. Because we've been in competition for so long. We've been in competition. And so we see women trying to keep other women small. Trying to tear them down. We do enough tearing down of ourselves. And so to watch this documentary, well, to have this space, first of all, from my tribal yoga studio is beautiful. But to watch that stripped down Rise Up documentary and to see these beautiful women at another deeper, more raw, vulnerable level holding this space. Oh, it was so powerful. So beautiful. This is what we crave as women. You know, we all know that as women we share our feelings and we have these conversations and we gossip or whatever. Um, whatever level that we are at in our sharing. We want to be felt at whatever level we're at, whether that's, the level of, hey, we're gossiping, and that's kind of the level that I'm at, is I'm talking about other people, and so I want to share it with you. Or I'm going to talk about my relationship and I want to share it with you. I want to talk about boys and I want to share it with you. Or I want to talk about what's happening in my heart and I want to share it with you. We share this emotional space with our sisters. And we crave that. However deeply we've gone into ourselves, we crave that connection with the feminine. And so, as I felt into the current layer of my connection with the feminine, I started seeing, and I have been seeing, and I really just brought to my awareness this desire that I have to have a girl group, a girl tribe here in Dallas that I can meet up with in person. Women that I can go out to a fucking bar with and enjoy myself and have a couple of drinks and be seen and invite the attention of the masculine. Women that I can go out and have a brunch with. Women that I can travel with, that I can go and work out with, that I can get together. Women that I can go out and have a brunch with. Women that I can travel with, that I can go and work out with, that I can get together and spend time with my children with. And it's funny because I have a couple of friends here that I can do that with, but I'm not super close with them. I've got the women at the tribal yoga studio, but I haven't connected with them outside of the studio. Why? What is going on? Why? Right? Why? What is being reflected to me in this missing connection that I desire? And so many of these layers have been so similar to, the layers that I've already gone through with a masculine, feeling like, finding somebody that resonates with me at the level that I'm at is going to be difficult. I'm going to have to settle for something different, or, it's rare. It's that I've held space for at different levels. They're catty. It's not safe for me to open my heart to them because they're so competitive. Because they're judging the way that I look. They're judging the way that I act. They're judging the attention that I'm getting from men. They're judging how brightly I shine my Shakti. It's not safe. Not safe to open my heart. So I've held space for so many of those layers. And today, what came up, one of the things that I noticed when I was watching that documentary was that I was connecting to this global experience of the feminine, this global wound. I was connecting to this global experience of the feminine, this global wound of it not being safe for us to embrace our sexuality, not being safe to connect with our inner feminine. Not being safe to connect with the feminine. And as I recognized that thread, I recognized that in my life, I've resisted connecting deeply with my own mother. I resisted connecting deeply. It felt weird, awkward to connect deeply. I connected more deeply with my mother than I did my stepmom, but it felt weird. It felt awkward. I did connect deeply with my sister. But even that, we don't talk as regularly as I do with my best friends. We don't talk as regularly as I would like to. And so I followed this thread of it not being safe to connect to the feminine. Ugh. And do you know where it took me? It took me right back to my birth. Right back to being yanked from my mother's womb via C-section, to having the cord cut before I was ready, out in this cold, just being held in this hospital, out in this cold, bright light, and shifted. And she did not breastfeed me, which is, this is her own choice and her own, there's no judgment there for that. But my connection to my placenta was immediately severed. My connection to my mother was immediately severed. And nothing was ever the same. And, we didn't co-sleep. We didn't, it was just the baby sleeps over here and, we connect for this thing and I'll give it the bottle. And, she connected with me in the ways that she knew how. And that's perfectly, that's perfectly fine. But that experience that so many babies, like our entire Western civilization has experienced, causes trauma. That abrupt disconnection from the feminine, it starts from the moment we're born. It runs so deep. And as I rebirthed myself, in my own timing, when I felt ready, through my mother's birthing canal, through her sacred yoni, feeling ready, full of love and unconditional love and support and trust. Moving through that process, allowing my placenta to remain connected, being brought skin to skin to my mother's chest, immediately nursing, being held there, looking into her eyes. My placenta still attached. Just immediately nursing, being held there, looking into her eyes. My placenta still attached. My connection to that nourishment from the womb still attached, not being artificially severed. Not only to just continue receiving my nutrients from it as it pumped vital life force and nutrients into my body, but until it was ready to disconnect naturally. Just feeling myself in connection with my mother, sleeping next to her, feeling that connection, that bond growing as in my own, my mother, physically, and finding this new level of connection, nursing, skin to skin contact, sleeping, and just feeling this beautiful support of her being there. And then this separation of my placenta, bringing myself on a journey of planting it, being held in my mother's arms and planting the placenta beneath the tree. Feeling that part of me rooting down and connecting into the roots in the womb of the earth, feeling myself root down into the earth. into the feminine, into that nourishment and into the earth, into the feminine, into that nourishment and unconditional love. And as I did that, what came to mind was the masculine and their experience of this. And what came to mind was just flooding in of like all of the world who's experienced this kind of birth where we're just either pushed out, ripped out, pulled out from our mothers, placenta cut. Whether we waited for the pulsation to stop or not, it's severed. Maybe we were nursed, maybe we weren't. But oh God, for men, the circumcision. Oh, when I was pregnant with my second, I was so afraid it was going to be a boy because I was in a marriage, in a religion that expected circumcision, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do that to my baby boy. And as I explored that when I was pregnant, oh my gosh, they were just like, no, you just don't question it, you just do it. And I'm like, what? How can you do that? What? I watched a video that shattered my heart, telling myself, okay, well, I'm going to watch this because they must at least numb this poor child or something. Oh my God. There's a local anesthetic, but that child, this is the most sensitive area of our body. They're being held down and cut a part of their body away. As I held space for that, the traumatization starts immediately after birth. It's built into our culture. And one of my friends made a post, which I shared on the Embodied Sacred Union page about circumcision, and you can go and read it. There's so much wounding that happens there as a result of that, and there's so much that it sets men up for. There is so much that it sets them up for that is traumatizing. So I just held space. And as I did, hold space for this dissociation from the feminine, from this I started to think about my own daughters and their births. As I rooted into the feminine and into that connection, I really felt called to rebirth my own babies. And I've done this a few times at different levels. And I felt called to do it again. So I connected to each one of, first my oldest baby, I connected to her soul energy. And I invited her to revisit with me her time in the womb. Feeling so loved, and her birth was so fucking beautiful. It was 36 hours of labor at home. And I was, at this time in my life, I was very dissociated from my body, but I knew my body, but I knew from the moment that I got married that I would have my babies at home and that I would have water births. And that's because I watched The Business of Being Born. And I have seen so many women who have watched that and chosen to choose their bodies, to trust their bodies. So beautiful. And so I did hypnobirthing. And oh, Lord knows I needed it, because otherwise I would have been dissociated from my body. But it helps me to drop down into the process and to trust the process. And it was 36 hours because my water wouldn't break. And I didn't know to, I didn't really recognize I wasn't fully surrendering down into my cervix. And so because of that, I wasn't fully feeling the desire to push. I would feel it occasionally. At one point, I didn't know what to do. I mean, it was my first birth, so. But the birth itself was so fucking beautiful. It was so beautiful. It was so serene. The entire labor was so serene. The birth was so beautiful. I remember bringing her out of the water and bringing her, we actually had her do a chest crawl, which this is the very first beginning of the things that I started to change as I rebirthed my daughter. So instead of just having her do a chest crawl, I supported her in finding her way to, instead of it being all her, I supported her in finding her way to my breast, to nurse. And I just held her and I looked at her just like we did. And I honored myself for the things that I did right, for the things that feel good. Instead of severing her umbilical cord after it stopped pulsating, we left it in this rebirthing process. I left it there. And I've had a lot of guilt. And I've held space so many times for the layers of separating my baby from me. She wasn't even that far. I slept in my bed and she slept in her crib, which was pushed up against my bed. She was not more than 1.5 feet away from me. But there have been several reasons that I've had a lot of guilt for that. One night I woke up and I was really connected. There have been several reasons that I've had a lot of guilt for that. One night I woke up and I was really connected to her. She had only to make a noise and she never cried at night. My ex-husband never had to wake up with either one of our babies because I was there. I was fucking there. The first sound they made, I grabbed them and I nursed them. And we fell back asleep together. And then I would change them with the lights off, very gently, using my sense of smell to make sure that they were clean. And then I would nurse them on the other side and we would fall asleep together again. And I would wake up scared that I rolled onto them or something. And so I would put them back in their crib until they woke up again. But the one time with my oldest, I woke up and she was crawling to me. She was trying to crawl to me. She was pulling herself across her. And it just, even then, as shut down as I was emotionally, it broke my heart. I didn't cry at that time, but there's been so many times. She shouldn't have ever had to do that. She should have been right there. She should have had the access that she needed. It's not for her as an infant to crawl to her source of food, of nourishment, to seek it out. It should have been right there available. And so in this rebirthing process, all she had to do was move her head. And I was right there. not because we shouldn't have our own inner ambition, but because our source of nutrition and nourishment comes effortlessly. And it is the belief that we have to struggle for it that creates the struggle. It is the truth in our body that we have to struggle for it that creates the struggle. And so I was there in this rebirthing process. I was there to hold her and sleep next to her. I was there for her nourishment without her having to struggle for it. Just as it was in the womb. And when her placenta was ready, it disconnected. When she was ready to disconnect from her, we took it and we buried it. This is not what happened in real life. This is what happened in the rebirthing process. In real life, I didn't know what to do with the placentas. We waited for them to stop pulsating. I didn't care to see them. I threw them out. I didn't know what to do with them. But now I see it and how sacred it is. And so I invited my daughter's energy and her soul to revisit this with me. As we allow her to be supported fully and nourished fully, supported by me. Supported by the nourishment that flows through me. And we planted her placenta beneath the branches of a tree and rooted her energy into Mama Gaia. With my second baby, I didn't want a 36-hour labor. I didn't want a 36-hour labor. And I didn't do hypnobabies, and I was not connected into my body. I had not started any of my inner journey. And so when I lost my mucus plug, I was like, no husband. This is not going to be 36 hours again. And so this time, I hastened the labor. When I would feel those labor pains, I would move into them. I would lean into them, but I wouldn't just lean into it. I would really I would really lean into it. I wanted to progress the labor. I had the intention of progressing the labor. And it progressed. It progressed. And my midwife came. We got in the water, and I was pushing, and I pushed more this time. I could feel where, first of all, with my first, I waited for my water to break. That's what took 36 hours. I wouldn't fully dilate because my water wouldn't break. There was a cushion there between her head and my cervix, and it wouldn't cause my cervix to dilate. And so I waited till my water broke, and then I birthed her. Well, this time I didn't wait for my water to break. I started pushing. Oh, it was a different experience. It felt different. It's different birthing a baby when they're in, I could feel it inside of me. I could feel the difference, whether they are on call or not. Whether they're in their birth sac still or not. It felt like a balloon. It felt like I was birthing a balloon, squeaking, inching down the body, squeaking, inching through my yoni. You know, when a baby's out of their amniotic sac, the vernix helps her to slide and move. So she can move forward and she can move back through the birthing process. The amniotic sac, the vernix helps her to slide and move. So she can move forward and she can move back through the birthing process the way she's supposed to. With this one, there was no moving down and then moving back a little. It was, she would eke down and stick. And when she came out, she had been pushed out. She didn't have a chance to move her body in the ways that it needed to move to come out. I pushed her out and her poor arm, her fist was above her head. Her whole arm came out with her head. She swallowed meconium because it was a stressful birth. She was being forced. And so she didn't get to come straight to my breast. They were too busy trying to get, she did come straight to my chest. I did get to hold her, but she didn't get to nurse. And they ended up calling an ambulance because her oxygen levels were not what they wanted them to be. She wasn't breathing as well as they wanted her to. I don't even know if we got to wait for the placenta to stop pulsating, to be honest with you, because we had to birth it so quickly and disconnected. I don't think we got to wait for it to finish pulsating because they called the ambulance, and the ambulance was only a block away from my house. The station was only a block away from my house. And so they were there immediately within 2 minutes. And they didn't want me to also be a patient. They wanted me to be able to go with my daughter. And so they disconnected the placenta right away. Oh, everything was so rushed. I realized she needs to nurse. And so if I had not had said anything, she never would have nursed. And so I told them that I wanted her to nurse, and they said that they would just keep an eye on her oxygen levels, and as long as her oxygen levels stayed up, it would be okay. And she nursed, and I tell you what, the drive to the hospital was only 7 minutes. And by the time we got there, she was perfect. And half that time she had been on oxygen, and her oxygen levels were not okay. But she started nursing, and she was perfect. She didn't need anything. We stayed there and observed her for a little while, but she was perfect. But she wasn't with me. She was not next to me. It was a little bit of a traumatic birth. And so, and just let me tell you, my youngest daughter, my oldest daughter expresses dissociation from her body as far as not being safe to connect to her emotions and not feeling completely safe to be open and vulnerable. And she's an Aquarian. That's an Aquarian thing too. But this rebirthing process, it helps to support her working through some of that. My second, she's a Taurus, and her birth reflected that. Oh, goodness gracious. So rushed. Not anchoring into her body. And this is very much her. This is very much her Taurus energy. Not anchored into her body. Very much in her head, rushing forward. Not trusting the process. And so as I rebirthed her, I recognized how much this rebirthing process with their soul was really supporting them in finding their anchor in the tendencies. And it's so interesting how it's all interconnected. Like, oh, she's an Aquarius, and this is like an Aquarian thing, and that was how her birth was. Oh, she's a Taurus, it's a Taurus thing, that's how her birth was. Oh, so crazy. But as I rebirthed my second baby, I didn't force the labor. I trusted her body. I trusted her timing. And I was there to support her, not to force her. And as she birthed in a beautifully calm and serene way, trusting the process, she was comfortable and she was safe and she was not rushed. not rushed. And her placenta remained attached. And she came directly to my chest and began nursing. And we rested there in that process. And I trusted her. And that was another thing with my first also. I had struggled a lot with nursing, with getting her to latch properly, because I was trying to get her to latch. And eventually I realized, God, I'm just going to let her come to me, because when she did the chest crawl, she was fine. And so I let her come to me, and that was when we finally got a good latch. My milk hadn't come in great because of the latch problems, though, and so I was nursing her very often because the latch problems, though, and so I was nursing her very often because they're just she wanted more. She just always wanted more. She just always wanted more. Always struggling for more nutrition, right? And so when I rebirthed her, she had an abundance. All she needed, right there, no struggle. And my youngest, in her rebirthing process, I trusted her. I trusted her to do things in her own time, to birth in her own time, to move her body the way that it needed to move for her to be comfortable to birth. My support to be there, to trust her, to support her. Oh. And this allowed me to see another layer that I've been exploring with my children, in not only healing some of these wounds that I felt that I had caused to them as young children, as infants, but also how to support them now. What do I do now? And this gave me a really clear view of the connection of the feminine. First of all, being able to root into that and that being safe. And for my oldest, not having to struggle or strive for connection or for nourishment. It's there. It's here. And for my youngest, trusting her body to guide her through the process. Not having to rush through it. Where I have cut out for me my goal and my main kind of support with my girls moving forward. And knowing that offering them that kind of support now is just setting them up individually for what they need for their support moving forward. The truest, deepest parts of the ways that they need to be supported in connecting to the feminine. So beautiful and so powerful.